Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we discuss why Abaddon the Despoiler is Chaos's only hope of victory. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k novel The Lords of Silence by author Chris Wraight. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, whatever topic of chaos and the ruinous powers you may want to discuss, it won't be long before Abaddon's name comes to mind. This guy has been integral to the rise of chaos since the very beginning, or at least as it comes to the Imperium. He was there when Horus was corrupted and turned to betrayal. He watched as the Dark Gods used his Primarch father as a mere tool of war, flooding him with power even his Primarch body could never sustain. He witnessed firsthand the selfishness of the ruinous powers, and in turn the mistakes of Lupercal. Though he would take up the mantle Warmaster, Abaddon would never become enslaved to the Dark Gods. He doesn't fight for their victory, he fights for his. His ambition, his resolve, is the legacy of Lupercal fired with the ashes of the Siege of Terror. In Abaddon resides the teachings of Horus, with none of his mistakes. In the centuries that followed the heresy, the traitor legions would be forced into the jail of the Eye, and the inevitable civil war would erupt. Though it would prove to be Abaddon who would reforge his legion and rise to prominence, the more logical assumption may have been for a Primarch to follow in Horus's wake, one of the fallen Warmaster's traitor brothers, to claim the mantle, to rebuild and reforge the war anew. However, it wasn't. So why? Well, an undoubted huge factor in this is that many of the traitor Primarchs had already had their souls enslaved by the ruinous powers. Angron to Khorne, Magnus to Tzeentch, Fulgrim to Slaanesh, and Mortarion to Nurgle. With the war for the material galaxy largely lost at this point, the ruinous powers return to what they do best: the Great Game. The Great Game is the eternal war of chaos, a never-ending campaign and conflict of warfare, as the gods battle amongst themselves for dominance within the Immaterium. Though there can never truly be a winner, each of the gods sees its powers rise and fall at times. The traitor Primarchs enslaved to these patrons became generals and champions within this new realm, and when they wasn't, their minds largely remained focused upon this new plane, as did their gods and masters. For the undivided Lorgar Perturabo, it was a war lost. For Lorgar, a time to dedicate himself entirely to his new patrons, the true gods, the Pantheon, remaining largely in a self-imposed meditation. And Perturabo did what Perturabo does best: sulk. Okay, it wasn't quite literally like that, but Perturabo did largely to remain in isolation, dedicating himself to mastering his knowledge of the warp and his many new creations. You could say it's arguable Perturabo remained most focused upon the Imperium out of all his brothers, for though he was rarely seen, his plans and calculations over the centuries proved vital for Abaddon's eventual triumph. And we do need to take into account how time doesn't work the same way within the Eye and Warp as it does within the material galaxy. While it may have been 10,000 years in the real world, for the traitors, it was most likely far less, highlighted perfectly by the still prime Abaddon returning to face an ancient Sigismund. However, regardless, For the traitor Primarchs, in all honesty, the war against the Imperium was largely over, at least in any real sense. The Scouring series to come will flush out the details and give us the real insight. But for me personally, I think it's pretty clear the traitor Primarchs knew they had lost. And with the disappearance of their loyal brothers, they simply lost interest to a certain degree. It was only Abaddon who classed the war as still ongoing. The siege was a defeat, but it was not the end. And there's a great little passage from the novel The Lords of Silence on just how the Primarchs are seen by a traitor Marine. In a similar vein, he has fought, from time to time, on the experience of the Primarchs. Those demented paragons lived a real life only for a couple of centuries, before being hurled back into their elemental prisons. There they squatted amid failure and sucked their yellowing teeth. They consulted grimoires and they built altars. They had less exposure to the realm of the real than he has had. Thus Dragon cultivates his contempt for the Primarchs. Not quite for his own, of course. In the Death Guard, rank and suzerainty still have weight. But even then, there is that old paradox. The Imperials only venerate their Primarchs because they are all dead. If any lived, they would soon remember what fools they were, and despise them too. Now, it is worth noting here that Dragon is a former renegade Marine, inducted into the Death Guard, so perhaps he doesn't have quite the same reverence and innate respect he may otherwise. However, in a way, it does speak to that mentality of the Primarchs, or at least the perception of them by some, that they were indeed wallowing in defeat. So this viewpoint does give that argument some credence. However, the larger reason for me on why Abaddon is Chaos's only true hope stems not only from the outbreak of the heresy, but all the way to now, 10,000 years later. And that's the reason for the Primarchs' War, because at its heart, for them, it's not about the Imperium, the galaxy, it's about family, their father and their brothers. And this is perfectly encapsulated by Typhus of all people, in a conversation with Dragon later. After talking with Dragon about the origins of the Death Guard Legion, Typhus then moves on to current events, with the falling of Cadia. Not how Mortarion seeks to push Chaos's advantage towards Terra, but instead to Ultramar. Ultramar, Typhus roars. Now the Traveller is even more animated, stomping from side to side, gripping his scythe tightly, sending the clouds spilling and slewing around his every move. Damned Ultramar. Too much was expended on that rabble of worlds before. Just when we have the chance to focus on the real prize, Ultramar rears up again. I despise it. I despise its master. I despise everything about it. And it is not important. Dragon suddenly finds he is enjoying this. The orders are there, he says. And where do they come from? Why are they there? Slowly, Typhus controls his anger. His movements become less jerky, more stately. It can't be hoped. I've spoken to the Primarch. I'll fight with him, just as ordered. I'll be at his side, his faithful servant. But you know what this is about. His brother. I had thought that nonsense was all behind us. I had thought they were all dead, or lost. The child kings were all gone. Speak to the Despoiler, then speak to a Primarch, and tell me who you'd rather follow in battle. Typhus, about as experienced a legionary as you're going to get anywhere within the traitor legions, is clearly under no illusions. Describing the Primarchs as child kings speaks a lot about how he feels about their maturity. And can we really say he's completely wrong here? The Primarchs are humanity embodied, its gifts and its flaws pushed to the max. While it gave them their greatest strengths, so too did it cause their biggest weaknesses, their jealousies, their immaturities. Perhaps had they been raised on terror beneath their father, together, things could have been different, but it wasn't to be. So while Typhus's viewpoint is undoubtedly biased, you can't say he's completely wrong either. Mortarion is forsaking the logical choice, the right tactical move, to simply face his brother Guilliman. That's not the choice of a general, it's not the choice of a commander, it's the choice of a sibling. As Typhus states, speak to the Despoiler, then speak to a Primarch, and tell me who you'd rather follow into battle. Abaddon may not have the sheer overwhelming aura of a Primarch, that instinctive pull of command, but he is a legionary, an Astarte. He thinks as one, he commands as one. The Primarchs, for all their greatness, simply don't. They never have and they never will. Perhaps in the Emperor's desire to encourage sibling rivalry, to further the efforts of the Crusade, and in his unexpected affection for his Primarch creations, creating that family dynamic may possibly have been his biggest mistake. Because the moment the Primarchs became brothers, instead of numbers, along came all the emotions and baggage of any family. And when your demigod warriors created to lead legions and conquer galaxies, who for the most part never had a real upbringing, that was always going to cause problems. And that's a flaw, a relationship Abaddon simply doesn't have to deal with. There's a single line from Typhus later that sums it up best. I sacrificed my soul and those of my brothers, all for that goal. I did not do it so I could see us waste our strength on some family feuding. The Ruinous Powers quest may be to destroy the Emperor, the one figure they have ever feared. That may have been the root of their heresy. Yet for the Primarchs, its core was always a family feud. And it always will be. Abaddon alone thinks in terms of true victory, of galactic conquest. And that is why he is War Master, why he is the true hope of chaos, in spite of the greater abilities of the Primarchs. For them, it was, is, and will always remain dominated by their relationships. Brothers and father. But as always everyone, what do you think? Why do you feel even now, some 10,000 years later, the Primarchs are still governed by their sibling rivalries? Why they still let that guide their judgments? Do you feel the return of the loyal Primarchs to the galaxy is possibly the worst thing that could happen to the traitors, taking the advantage away from the true war? Or is it actually the best? As even in their wars of jealousy, the traitor Primarchs can still inflict huge damage to the Imperium. And are the loyal Primarchs any different? Are they still governed by the same rivalries? Or do they have the ability to think in the larger picture? Now, could another name be out there somewhere, as yet unheralded and unknown? Could another name rise to lead a unified chaos, taking Abaddon's place? Of course it's possible. In the event of the Despoiler's death, it's a certainty another would seek to fill the power vacuum. Yet it's the Primarchs who represent Chaos's greatest champions. The real powers within the legions, aside from Abaddon. and with them being so consumed by their rivalries and feuds, it's clear Abaddon is Chaos's one true hope for victory. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.